What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. I appreciate each of you taking the time out of what I'm sure is a busy day to listen to the little podcast that I have going on here. Just want to start off this episode by thanking those of you that have sent emails, messages of support, and just all round general good vibes through to me over the last couple of weeks. I'm really stoked to know, firstly, that you're listening, but number two, that you're actually getting some value out of what I'm doing here and the people that we're getting on the podcast are doing, because it's what it's all about. It's hopefully you are gaining some insight into my little life, my personal struggles, some of the things that I've been able to do to overcome some of those struggles and keep moving forward, because at the end of the day, I know it's cliche, but we are all in this together, and everyone has their own individual battles that they are going through, and everyone has their own downtimes, but they also have their own successes and triumphs. And what I'd like to encourage you guys to do if you're listening to this episode today is jump on whatever social you have, Facebook, Instagram, and share with us one of your successes as a dad, as a father, as a human being. What's something that you have achieved, no matter how small or how big it is, over the last month? Tag us in it at the Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, the Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. If you want to use the hashtag #BeUnstoppable and just tag us in your post, give us a win. What's been a big win for you? Might be a change in habit, might be, maybe you've started to do some of that training that you have been putting off for years. Maybe you're just putting a little bit of time aside for yourself, going for a walk, spending more time with the kids, opening up lines of communication with your wife or your partner, whatever it is, as big or small as it is. Because I think sometimes, and this is one thing that I am super guilty of, we get caught in this work mode where it's head down, ass up. We've got to keep going. We've got to try and do as much as we can, and we sometimes lose sight of the wins, the small changes, and those small changes can be the things that alter the course of our lives and the lives of our families. And sometimes just starting to move the needle half a degree in one direction can be what we need to actually kickstart a big change, which is going to last for 5-10 years down the line. So jump on your socials, share a post, share a story, tag us in it, and share a win that you've had over the last couple of months, or share something that you've learned from this podcast. Share whatever episode that was. I'd appreciate if you could do that, and I look forward to seeing those wins on the socials. So let's celebrate each other as men, as human beings, as fathers, and our families, and let's get amongst it. So I guess on that, kind of going into what we're talking about today, which is what example are we trying to set? And not only for our kids, but for our communities, for our wives, for our partners, for our greater families, and everything like that. And not just necessarily settling for where we're at. Because there's one thing that I've learned, and there's been different times in my life where I've gone through, and this is something, especially over the last couple of months for me, that I've struggled a bit with, because, and I'm sure we all do it, and I've spoke to people that I know we all do it, and I'm sure there's people that don't do it, but let me give you a bit of an insight into my little twisted mind and the way it works sometimes. I'll go through stages where I'm super motivated, and I'll go through stages where I'm unmotivated. And my mindset can sometimes switch between, and this is as a business owner, and sometimes as a, physically, as an athlete and things like that. But like where we'll go, things just aren't going to get any better. This is just where we're at, and I'll feed myself some reasons. I'll also feed myself a lot of excuses as to why things can't get any better. It's, right now in Australia, we're going through winters. So from the point of view of our specific business, like a health and wellness business, it's harder to get new people in when it's colder, because people are generally demotivated. People aren't really looking to make a change. It is the cliche where, they want to, that once it starts to get warmer, and especially where we live, where, we're literally 5 minutes drive from the beach, People are going to want to get warmer. They're going to start to want to look better in their bathing suits. So it's not until it gets warmer that they start kind of putting it on their radar. So it is a little bit harder this time of year. And sometimes I reserve myself to the fact I just settle, and it's like, okay, because it does seem like it's too hard. And then there's other times where I want to push, and I want to push hard, and I want to try and do more. And one of the things that kind of flips my mindset from just settling to wanting to do better is the thought of, obviously, what example am I setting for my kids? By just settling for where we are and where we're at and not trying to improve myself or our position, what's that example for them? And right now, where my kids are, like they're almost 6 and 2, we're not having any real in-depth conversations. In fact, the most in-depth conversations I have with our 6-year-old at the moment is how complex and silly the English language can be. She's learning to spell, she's learning to read, she's learning to write, and it's little things like, digress for a quick second, but I think the word was catch. And she goes to me, she asked me, is it there CH at the end? So ch, like she's making that sound. So she's like, is it CACH, catch? And it's like, I'm like, no, it's TCH. And then she goes to me, why does it make the same noise as just CH? And I'm like, I don't know. It just does. Like there's so many instances like that we've had. So it just kind of highlights how the one thing that I've learned over the last 6 months is how complex the English language is when you're looking at it through the eyes of a 5.5, 6-year-old who is trying to read and write. Anyway, back to it. Setting the example. And the one thing that, I come back to is, let's say in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, Sophie sits down, she's 12, 13, 14, and she wants to go and do something. And I'm having a conversation with her about not giving up and not giving in. And, there's certain things in my life where there's been times where I've felt like giving up. Now, I'm not talking about, sometimes if we lay all the facts on the table and it's better off not to do something, that's a different story, because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's better for everyone involved if we don't, really be stubborn about it, and sometimes it's just better to let some things go. But I'm talking about just when things get hard, because things get hard for a lot of us all the time, especially at the moment. We are going through a very hard time in history for, the current economic climate with the vid and all those other things that are going on. So, it's hard for a lot of people. I understand that. But there are times where we shouldn't give up. And the thing that stops me from giving up on a lot of things is, what example am I going to set? And the scenario I put in my mind, rightly or wrongly, is when my kids get old enough and we start to have a conversation about this particular scenario, like I'm putting it into context for one particular scenario. And they ask me why I stopped or why I gave up. What am I going to be able to tell them? Am I going to be able to give them a legitimate reason why we had to give up? Like, is there actual facts around this was the best thing for us to do and this is why we did it? Or is it just going to come down to me saying it got too hard? Because when I put things in that context, it really makes me understand, what example am I setting for them? Because the old cliche of, you don't want to give up because you never know who's watching, is for everything that we do. And I think we know, those of us with older kids, especially if we take just talking in comparison, like they pick up more than you know. They pick up on your moods, they pick up on your emotions, they pick up on your habits, good or bad, and they become basically mini versions of you. So when, for me, I look at particular scenarios about either why I won't do something, why I don't want to do something, why maybe I want to quit and want to stop, and trust me, like for me, we've been in, and the fellow business owners that are maybe listening to this podcast, I'm sure you can emphasize and appreciate this, over the last 10 years, there has been so many times where I've just gone, fuck this, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to go home and I'm going to go and get a job. But for me, the reason I haven't is, one, this conversation that I've been having with myself, where I've gone, our kids get older and we have a conversation about this specific scenario, what am I going to tell them as to why we stopped? What am I going to tell them as to why I quit? Are there reasons, or am I just going to have to revert back to it just got too hard? Or, and how is that going to reflect, especially if it becomes a teaching moment for the kids where we're trying to teach them grit and we're trying to teach them a little bit of resilience? Because as much as we want our kids to have a soft pass through life, there are going to be different teaching moments as the kids get older where we are going to need to teach them grit and resilience. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through the example. Now, I'm not saying that you need to push through things to your detriment to your mental health or physical well-being. That's not what I'm saying. But there are instances in our lives where, and I can tell you that I've done it in the past too, where we just give up on ourselves far too easily, or we give up on a situation far too easily. And that's where our kids can inherit our grit and our passion and our determination. And sometimes the difference between settling and setting the example can be the things that they look at and they inherit. And then if we think about it in the context of, what's the conversation going to be like if I'm talking to my kids about what has actually happened here and why we had to do something? What's that going to look like? And am I going to be happy in that time with my future self about the answer that I'm giving to them? If I seen this same trait in them, would I be happy that they inherited that trait from me, or am I going to beat myself up because maybe I could have done a little bit better, I could have stuck with it for a little bit longer? And there's a really interesting book, I've listened to it on audiobook. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth, and I actually started listening to it from a coaching point of view, and when I got into it and I started listening, I actually got more out of it from, I guess, a parenting point of view, and looking at it from how can I help my children obtain that grit and that determination, and try, because there's, unfortunately, as much as we don't want our kids to fail, we need to try and set them up with failure in controlled environments to try and help them so that when they get older, they're not as reliant on us. And that's, the goal of, as hard as this is to kind of say, and it's even harder to articulate, but my thing is, as a parent, like, one of the goals for me as a parent is when they get old enough to leave the house, you almost don't want that. You want them to know that you are there for them, but they are not reliant on you, and they can always come to you whenever they have a problem. But you also want them to be self-sufficient and be their own human beings, and that, I think, starts with the example that we set, the exposure that we have to the exposure that we have to our other things, like our other our health, what we do with our health, what we do with our profession, what we do with, if we have a business, what we do with our business. And settling and setting the example is you can walk a really fine line, because, as I said, you don't want to do things that are going to be a detriment to your overall mental health and well-being, or your physical health and well-being, but you also want to show them that you need to grit through some things, you need to push through some things, and sometimes you just need to go head down, ass up, and keep going. And it's a balancing act, it's hard. But I guess the one thing that I just wanted to say, and I wanted to go through on this episode, is when things do get hard and they get tough, and it does for everybody, it's a normal feeling to sometimes feel defeated and feel like you're not going to be able to come out the other side of this. And one thing that I've done, and a tool that I've used to snap me out of it as a dad, is if I'm having a conversation with my kids when they're older about this particular instance, am I going to be happy with the answer that I give them as to why we stopped, or why we quit, or why I couldn't continue? Or am I going to give them a true and honest answer and be unhappy with myself and be unhappy with the response that I have to give them? And then if they were to exhibit that same trait in a similar situation, I'll never be disappointed with them, but will I be happy that they've learnt that from me? And that's one thing for me about setting the example, and there's so many instances we can, apply that to, but that's one tool I've used that has helped me, and it's kind of helped snap me out of it a little bit, snap me out of, maybe a dark spiral and snap me into action and actually doing something to try and move the needle forward to improve a tough situation that I'm in. Because as I've gone through on a lot of previous podcasts, I think that when we do get ourselves into a point where we're feeling like we're in a pit, we're feeling in a bit of a hole, and we kind of feel like there's no way out, just focusing on what the next action is, just the one little thing to start that momentum moving in the right direction, is one of the best ways I've found to try and get myself out of it. And that one action may be going and talking to somebody, just reaching out either to a friend, reaching out to a professional and getting some help, because then they may be able to give you some clarity on the situation and give you the next thing that you need to do. There is going to be instances in life where maybe giving up and quitting is a better option. But for me, putting it through the lens and through the context of, in this particular situation that I'm in today, if I'm having a conversation with my kids later on down the track, when they're old enough to comprehend, some bigger picture stuff in the world and in life, am I going to be happy with the answer that I give them, like from the actions that I'm about to take, whether that be to give up or that be to keep going? And that's certainly been one thing that's helped me be probably a little bit more grittier in situations where maybe I would have given up, and hopefully help me set a good example for my kids. Now, we're not perfect. We're not going to, pass with flying colors on every single thing, but that's the adventure, that's the journey. That's the beauty of being a dad and a father, is we can also show our kids when we're wrong, and we can show them that it's okay to be wrong. We can show them that it's okay to fuck up and do the wrong things, but we can also help them set the example and show them the example of what grit and determination needs to be, by not maybe giving up when it gets a little bit hard. So if you're going through it at the moment, dads, feel free to reach out, and have a chat via message, whatever the case might be. Here for a chat. Jump on our Facebook group as well. We've got a free Facebook group, The Unstoppable Dad, so you can jump in there, pop a post up. There's plenty of other great dads in there, so open a line of communication there. But other than that, hopefully you got something out of it. Don't give up, don't quit on yourself. There's going to be times where maybe you need to give up on a particular situation because it's going to be better for you and your family, but keep at it. Everyone's doing a great job. Much love to you all. See you next week. Bye.